You're listening to the Not Just Numbers podcast, a conversation with mathematicians on their work and their lives to get to know them and discuss common biases and misconceptions. Hi everybody, welcome to the new episode of It's Not Just Numbers. Today we are recording an episode that has been asked over and over by many of you. I hear from many of our listeners, it's nice and well to know our lecturer, what people in mathematics are doing, what academic life is like. But what about the non-academic life? Like we end the mathematics degree and most likely we won't pursue a PhD or a postdoc. And even if we do, it's not a given that we can get a job in academia. So what's next and how do we go about that? And it seems that the university is not really preparing us too well, or at least this is the impression, on how to get a job afterwards. So it's worth starting the discussion and having a look at what some of our peers and friends have done to find their own jobs outside academia. And for this today we have, first of all, Anna in front of me.
Hi there.
And three other guests who have moved to industry and stayed there, and who have moved to industry and came back to academia. And so we will try to get a discussion on how they are different, how they are similar, how can we find a job outside academia, and hopefully start answering some of your questions. I'm pretty sure it will take much longer than just this episode to cover everything we would like to cover, but at least it's a start. And so without further ado, let me introduce our guests. Right next to me, there is Sven Bootsma, one of our students from a couple of years ago.
Hello.
And then Oscar Koster, which was actually one of my master students from 1.5 years ago.
Hi there.
And on the other side of the screen, joining remotely from Germany, there is Max Lein.
Hi, everyone.
And so we always begin the episodes in the same way, so everybody is just waiting for this. Can you tell us who you are and what you do? So it doesn't have to be a mathematics job at this point. So what are you doing right now? Sven, would you like to start?
Yes. So, my name is Sven Bootsma, and I currently work at TNO. So that's an applied research institute in the Netherlands. And most of my work now is really on two different topics. One of them is zero knowledge proofs. So there you try to prove things without revealing extra information. We can delve into the intricacies maybe a bit later. And another part is quantum computing. So we try to develop algorithms that can run on a quantum computer, which is a very special supercomputer, I would say.
Can you give a very simple example of what this zero knowledge proof is about?
I can, yeah. So for zero knowledge proofs, you try to convince somebody that you know, for example, your password without actually telling them your password. And one of the best examples I always find is that suppose you have like a colorblind friend and you are not colorblind, but you have a red ball and a green ball. And you want to convince to your colorblind friend that these balls are actually different. So they are completely identical except their colors. So you can make a zero knowledge proof for this. So you tell your colorblind friend to hold the balls. You stand in front of them. They put the balls behind their back and they either swap them or not. And then they show you and you say, okay, you swapped them or you didn't swap them. And the first time you get it right with 50%, but if you do that again, it becomes 25%, 12.5%. So it decreases to zero. And that's zero knowledge proofs because you haven't told him which ball is green or red. But now he does know that there are in fact two different balls.
I see, because they know whether they've swapped or not. And
yes.
You want to prove that you know that they are different, of course.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah, so it's very important that your colorblind friend actually cooperates. So if he or she lies, then that becomes problematic. But that's also something you have to deal with in the real world. So I think it's still a good example.
Thank you. And you, Oscar, what are you doing currently?
My name is Oscar, and I actually did a master's with Marcello, as he already said, which was more or less on geometry and topology. But now I'm doing something completely different. I am currently a data and AI engineer at a company called New Nexus. And what I do is basically also twofold. What I do is twofold. I do a piece called data engineering, which is about actually making sure that companies can use their data in a good way. So let me try to clarify that a bit. Suppose, for instance, that you go to a football stadium. Then the football club, they keep track of a lot of things that you do. So namely, you buy a ticket, then you go there, and maybe you buy some merchandise. You buy a cap or a shawl or whatever. And then you go inside and you find your seat, and then you find you're hungry. So you actually want some fries, or you want a beer, or whatsoever. And of course, the football club, they want to gain as much money as possible to actually buy good players and have nice
Very
matches.
Important, yes.
Precisely. So they want to maximize the amount of money they can make. So, for instance, they want to have enough fries for everyone to be sold during the break. So what we are doing is basically making sure that we can collect this data, can clean this data, but also can make links between this data. So, for instance, if we know that a lot of people are on one side of the stadium, then maybe it might be possible that there is a lot of beer needed on that side of the stadium, or a lot of fries, so that we don't run out of beer or fries. Or similarly, we want to know whether if people already went to the merchandise stand, whether they still actually go to buy fries, or that they say, oh, well, we already spent our money on merchandise and now we want fries, or we won't get fries. Connecting these pieces of data is actually a very nice puzzle, and it also is a big challenge to actually get the right infrastructure, make it secure, make it clear, and also to actually visualize it for companies so that they can actually generate their own insights on this data.
It sounds like a lot of fun to think about.
It is, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you, Max, Marcello already kind of hinted at the fact that you first went into industry and then came back to academia. What are you doing currently, and what have you done in industry?
So my name is Max Lein. I'm at the University of Potsdam. I'm in mathematical physics. So I'm in the Union of Theoretical Physics and Mathematics. I started out as a physicist and got into condensed matter physics. And I think what really fascinated me about the math part was that there were a lot of tools, modern tools, that allowed me to better understand problems. And one of them was how to basically zoom out, so microscopically. The physics is described by quantum mechanics, but if you zoom out, because you have a macroscopic sample typically, you can derive effective laws of physics that are easier to solve and easier to understand, and still capture the same essential physics. And this interest in condensed matter physics also helped me make the transition to the industry, because I worked in the semiconductor industry. It was a small company in Austria, but it's one of those hidden world champions. So they are a market leader when it comes to wafer bonding and nano imprint lithography. And it's very, very likely that their machines have touched many of the objects that we are using right now to record this podcast. For example, most camera chips, so CMOS sensors, are produced using their machines. Of course, it's one step of many, right? So it's not just, you shouldn't think of it as something that you do in one step. But the semiconductor industry has many of these hidden world champions that are extremely crucial for one step. That is very important, but you need many, many steps.
And what were you doing there?
I was starting with my boss, who he was promoted to lead and build and lead so-called data analysis and modeling team. Because the company is smaller, the boundaries between the teams were fuzzy, and it was strongly encouraged to interact with other teams. So we sat in the same office as the people who are into modeling. And my background in physics and my ability to translate back and forth from physics to math, for example, was seen as a big asset, because we also had, for example, engineers, so people with PhD in engineering who were really focusing on particular aspects and trying to simulate, let's say, simpler situations to better understand certain parts of the so-called wafer bonding process. I can explain things in more detail as needed.
I think this will be very useful to hear for our many interdisciplinary students and double degree students, so please keep your ears open as well. Now, this is quite difficult because it's the first time we are asking people to the relationship with mathematics without an academic context in most cases. So I still want to try. So I would like to know, let me start back from Sven, what drove you into mathematics? What did you like about it? And how was the experience of studying mathematics for you?
So I actually thought about this question before I got to this podcast. And I think my story with mathematics is a little bit funny, because when I was in high school, I liked mathematics. I mean, I was just good at it, and sometimes when you're just good at things, you also start to like them. But I also liked physics, and I also liked chemistry. So first I wanted to study chemistry, but in the end, I didn't really like the proofs in high school that you had to do in mathematics, so the flat Euclidean geometry proofs. So I decided to study physics because there's also math there, and I liked stars, I liked galaxies, I liked black holes. So I started studying physics in Groningen. But after doing 1 week of the experiments you had to do in physics, I decided that it's completely not for me. I did not like doing physics experiments, and I did not like doing error analysis, and there was this professor that was standing on his desk and I'm just performing some experiment, and I was like, I just want to do the math behind this experiment. So I actually decided after 1 week that I was going to study mathematics. So I think that's a funny story, but it was just a feeling. So I didn't like the feel. Maybe I should have tried it more, physics, but sometimes you just have these feelings. You're like, no, I should just do this other thing. And in Groningen, this was actually quite easy because 2 of the courses were already the same. So I only had to swap 1 course, and then all the other courses for the rest of the year, I just followed them with the mathematics students. And for what I liked about the degree, I think that I always like a challenge. So, and I like a challenge also in personal life with sports, but also in work and also with my study. And it's really nice in mathematics that you can think very long about a very simple or seemingly simple problem, and you cannot figure it out. When you talk with some people about it, and then you are just cycling home, and then suddenly you have figured it out. And I think that's such a nice feeling that it's very hard to get at in different places in life than that you can get them in mathematics. That's it.
That's fascinating. Thanks, Oscar.
I actually have a very similar story. So when I was in high school, I also I was good at math and I liked it, but I liked physics a lot more. I learned about quantum physics, and I really wanted to know more about quantum physics and about relativity and general relativity and do all the cool stuff. And at some point I decided, well, I want to study physics, but to really understand the physics, and especially the theoretical physics, I should also know the math. So I decided to start with the double degree. And once I started that, I actually had the same experience as Sven. So the experiments and actually sitting in a semi-dark lab and playing with lasers and measuring some constant and then being tens of thousands degrees off or something, I really hated that. But I kept out thinking, well, maybe I can be a theoretical physicist. And so I studied both math and physics for about 1.5 years, after which I found that it was just too stressful. And when I actually had to make the choice, I noticed by myself that I really had fallen in love with math, with studying the proofs and actually, well, the beauty of doing math and diving into problems in very large detail. So then I sort of decided, well, let go of physics and then start doing math. But throughout my studies, I have sort of sought out some physics things over time.
So now I'm curious because, okay, we have a physicist turned mathematician, we have a physicist turned mathematician, and guess what? Who we have behind the screen? Max, what about you?
Another physicist turned mathematician, or still, I would say both. Basically, I knew I wanted to become a professor since I was a little child. So I remember watching episodes of Star Trek. And most kids, they want to become the captain, because the captain knows what to do and so on. But when I watched these episodes, the captain would always turn to Data or Spock, basically to the science officer, and ask, "Oh, what should I do now?" And the science officer would think and would analyze the situation and tell him, "Oh, you should do this." And then the captain say, "Oh, okay, let's do this." And I thought, okay, I would like to be the guy who understands what's going on, right? Initially it was between chemistry and biology and physics, and then it narrowed down. And basically, I think since I was 12, I wanted to become a physicist. And then, when I started university, I took my theoretical physics courses, and most of the things I understood, but there were some derivations that I thought I was just too dumb to understand. And then it turns out, if you look more closely, well, there are actually steps that, a good theoretical physicist just does, but my brain wasn't wired for that. And so I invested to learn more of a math to understand, let's say, the gaps that I saw in the derivations. And I had the fortune to meet my supervisor in the first lecture at university that I ever heard. And basically, he's at home both in theoretical physics and mathematics. And basically, his place in science was one that appealed to my brain. My gray matter seems to be wired for this kind of thinking. And what I really love about a more mathematical approach is that it forces conceptual clarity. Some of the derivations in physics, they're a bit vague, and it seems that other people have some good intuition, but my intuition is different, or I don't know if it does not exist or if it's different, but basically what I prefer is really to spell out all the details, and math is really relentless, right? It really forces you what are you doing, right? And there should be no gaps. And if there are gaps, either reviewers or coworkers will tell you, no, there's a gap that you have to fix. And once you get accustomed to it, it's really nice. And the second thing that I really love is you can develop really modern tools, because I noticed in a lot of theoretical physics, they used really ancient technology. They used, if you have a younger audience, they used flip phones, and I was developing smartphones, the next generation of smartphones. So this is something that I really, really liked.
And I'm curious, and I will then come back the opposite way. How did your expectations from when you were young about becoming a physicist and then realizing that you needed mathematics fit or clash with the reality of things? So what you found at university what you expected from school, or was it actually different?
I think especially when it comes to math, I was not really prepared. So the style of math that I learned at school was completely different. I remember I had a very, very old school linear algebra professor. And, like clockwork, he would finish 9 blackboard segments in 45 minutes. Then he would sit down, and one of his teaching assistants would wipe the blackboard for him. He was this kind of person. He was extremely fast and precise. And I was thinking, after 2 weeks, well, when is this thing with lemmas and proofs going to end? And when does the real math, when is it going to start, right? And the truth is, it's just a very different style. And I first had to accustom to it. With physics, the barrier was, let's say, there I didn't feel this at all. There I felt very much like a fish in water. Especially the theory courses, they were very appealing to me because I really wanted to learn about quantum mechanics. And then I fell in love with classical mechanics as well. And so this was really appealing. But the math courses in particular, I felt that school did not prepare me at all.
Oscar, quantum physics. No, but the question is, what was your experience between school and university? So did it match your expectation, or was it surprising in good or bad ways?
I think that during high school, my expectation, at least of physics, was that it was also this very precise business. And I'm not saying that it's not. I'm saying that math is just much more precise. You're not saying that if the sine of an angle is or if the angle is small enough, then the sine of the angle is approximately the angle, which well, I mean, it is a good approximation, but it doesn't feel right when you do it at some point. And I feel that I underestimated that bit a lot. So once I started doing math and I started seeing that it was this precise business, I really fell in love with that more. I also I have the same experiences as Max has. In high school, mathematics was really about doing these exercises in sort of basic analysis, which came down to calculating stuff. And there were some parts that were proving, and I actually, in hindsight, I really liked those parts. And then when I came to university, I saw that was much more what math was. That there was this more abstract thing that had maybe more to do with language than actually to do with calculating stuff. And I think I enjoyed that a lot.
Would it be fair to say that the mathematics in university wasn't at all as you expected, but that you were pleasantly surprised about it in a way?
I was pleasantly surprised by it. Yeah, definitely.
Does it also is it also true for you, Sven? How did you experience this?
I feel like I'm gonna repeat a lot of what Oscar is saying, and maybe Oscar's gonna repeat a lot what I have been saying. But yeah, for me, so maybe first of all, I did not intend to study mathematics. So when I was 17, I graduated high school when I was 17. I sort of thought I liked physics. So I was just going to study physics in Groningen. Just felt like a natural choice somehow back then. Although I feel like now I didn't really know what I was doing when I was 17, to be honest. But and then I quickly came to the realization that I did not like approximations, let's say it like that. And mathematics apparently at university was very precise, and that was something I really liked. So it's really nice. So this is also something that Max has already said, but also Oscar. I found it really nice that in some of the courses in mathematics in the beginning, you learn these proofs and you learn that everything needs to be correct, and somehow that's just something I like. I like looking at a proof and just being able to follow everything, and there's no doubt about what is correct or what is not. You cannot really debate it, and that's something I find really nice. But I don't think that it came as a surprise, or maybe not as a surprise. I think I sort of went in it without any expectations, and somehow I liked it. So, I mean, there was no expectations, so also not really a surprise, I would say.
I'm still quite curious because for me it's all been the other way around. Like I liked a lot mathematics, physics, computer science, science in general, but especially those three, and philosophy. And somehow doing mathematics, I was hooked in because I heard some talks by professors doing mathematics applied to physics, to gravitational lenses. But they were doing really pure abstract math. And then I thought, okay, if I want to understand physics, that may be the right way. And if I want to keep close to computer science, that maybe could help. And so I done mathematics in the sense that it would keep me close to both by doing none, something. And I think I'm still gravitating towards that. I like to collaborate with people in computer science and physics, even though I do pretty much abstract mathematics. But somehow I remained attached to the vagueness of not doing mathematics. The way I can think about proofs from my side is first having a vague idea of what I want to do, and then making lots of pictures and try to figure out what on earth is going on. And then, yes, jumping and trying to make precise and get upset at the small details that take months instead of the rest that was much faster. But I don't think I would be able to do mathematics just go in the right precise way without messing around with just making the sinus of alpha, for alpha very small, just alpha, and see what happens. I don't know if I'm getting my point across.
Then referring back to what Max already told, would you say that you're working from your intuition a lot? Do you have a lot of intuition about the math you're doing?
I think you build up your intuition by playing around in the sense of trying things out and making small experiments, making test problems which are very much not what you're going to study, but in various different ways close enough so that you can get an understanding, especially when you're doing research and you don't really know what you are asking or what you're answering when you start.
So what's the point that you're trying to make, that you look at mathematics from this computer science or physics perspective and then start doing the math? Or did you mean something else?
I mean that to me mathematics is not just the precise, beautiful precise theory that allows you to derive everything in an undeniable way, but it's also the messy part of figuring it out in a way closer to what you do as a physicist or a computer scientist, where you don't care of making it precise at first, you just care of getting an answer that matches with your experience of reality. And so I see mathematics of both of these things.
Yeah, so I think this is a very good point you make, and especially during my studies, I don't think I really appreciated your point of view here. So I didn't really like the messy stuff. I just wanted everything to be clean, and that's maybe also why I took some of the more algebra and geometry type of courses where everything you just start from some definitions and you prove everything and there's no mess. But now that I've actually been working in more applied research, I think it's very nice that you can do all these messy things and then somehow a good result for a client or something shows up. So I've found a newfound appreciation for that point of view, definitely. Yeah.
And also, I think there is a large difference between actually doing research and taking courses. As you were saying, when you take courses, you are sort of stuck on problems. You try to understand stuff, and then it's nice that it's just you can follow a line of reasoning, and that the line of reasoning is really there, and it's not just you have to know this one assumption that we always do. And also, when I did the master's project, I noticed that I also do like the messy stuff, and I do like the making drawings and thinking about things, but there it is different because, well, you sort of have to figure out a new line of reasoning, and you know there is no line of reasoning there. You don't have to follow along to anyone.
Yeah, it's really about intuition building. I very much identify with what Marcello has said, and I feel like I have to give myself the freedom to say something completely stupid. But if there is, let's say, a grain of an idea that you want to explore, and you try to enforce this rigor too early, then it feels like a straitjacket, like an unnecessary constraint that is blocking me. But if I, let's say, pursue something, and then even if I found out, it indeed is stupid, I still learn something in the process. Even if you think of it in more of algebraic terms, in math there's this division sometimes, real or imagined, between algebraists and analysts, and in algebra it's very important that you start with the right definitions and with the right structures. But somebody had to cook up these structures and say, okay, this is the right definition, and then in this theorem I really need all these properties, or maybe I don't. You start with something that is, let's say, close to the correct definition but doesn't quite match it. And then in the process of working with it, you realize, I actually need this, or that's actually not necessary, and I can drop this assumption. So this experimentation is really part of the fun.
So if we talk about playing around with mathematics in another sense, maybe not about math anymore, in your life besides math, because it exists for most people, what do you like to do? Does anybody want to go first? Do you have a clear idea? Maybe you, Oscar.
Sure. I actually do a lot of sports. I recently started doing triathlon. Before that I was just running and cycling, and now I'm actually also picking up swimming. And I really like being out in nature and walking or running or cycling. Swimming not yet outside. Walking around there and actually challenging myself. After I did math, I actually started doing this kind of stuff. I think there was more space in my head. And actually I started doing marathons and actually challenging myself in that. Next to that, I also like playing board games, Magic, Wingspan, a lot of other things. Yeah, that's about it.
Favorite game?
That's a difficult question.
You can choose 3.
I can choose 3. Well, then that's still a difficult question. It also really depends on who you're playing with and what the situation is. I mean, we have this game called Regenwormen, and when you have when you're just sitting in a pub with people, then that's an amazing game. When you're playing it just on a regular Sunday afternoon, it's very boring. So
okay.
And for you, Max, what do you like to do when you have time off?
I also do a lot of sports. I also do triathlons, minus the running, minus the swimming. So I've always loved cycling. Was really something that I enjoyed. But then in my mid-30s, I discovered structured training, and this did a number. This was probably the biggest improvement in the quality of life that I've made, because it taught me about growth mindset, that practice makes you better. I mean, all of this sounds very mundane and stupid, but this has really helped me understand students better. So when I interact with students and they failed an exam, and I explain to them, okay, do you do any sports or do you play an instrument? They say, for example, yes, I play an instrument. And now imagine you give before a concert, you would practice the piece, right? Yes. And do you get better? Yes. And it just takes me spelling this out for them to make the connection so that they can figure out, well, it's not a law of physics, a fact of life, that they're quote unquote bad at math or bad at this particular course, but they can actually do something about it. And all of the tools are something that they already have. And stuff like this. I really like also the fact that, even if I stop training for a while because I'm sick or I take a break, I get better again. And it gives me self-confidence, because I know, okay, it will take some work, but you will get back into it. You will get back into the groove. So this was really something that I really, really enjoy. But apart from this, I really love also cooking, and also love spending time with my family.
Is there a particular kitchen you really like cooking dishes from?
Ooh, that's hard. So some of my favorite dishes are, for example, from Mexico, from Japan, where I spent close to 10 years. Some are Italian, because I spend a lot of time with Italians. There's one dish that is extremely popular and that I learned while I was visiting Marcello. It's a pasta with a zucchini sauce. And it's one of the few sauces that our kids will eat. So if you have kids, you know that they are sometimes really picky eaters, and I do variations of this recipe several times a month. Exactly. Yeah.
Sven.
So what do I do besides working at TNO? I actually run track. So I run track competitively. So I train 6 times a week for the 200 and 400 meters sprint. And I've actually always done this since I was 6, I would say. I've done athletics at least. Then I got injured on my elbow because I was doing the javelin. And then I decided to switch to sprinting. And since August last year, I actually decided that I want to see if I can do even better. So I decided to actually join a team with a proper coach. So with the goal of being able to participate in the Dutch championships for the 200 meters. And I would say it's going well. I'm getting better, but I'm also getting injured quite often. So that's something that's hard to balance, right? To have enough recovery and be able to train hard. So that's something I do every evening except Sunday. Sunday is rest day. And if I have some time left, I really like to play chess. So I think I play chess maybe a bit obsessively because I do it a lot. But I really like the game. We also play it at work with colleagues, so that's nice. And sometimes I go to the pub and play with some friends there. And besides that, I like hanging out with my girlfriend. I like hiking, going on holiday, these types of things. Yeah.
I think this dispels a myth that you see repeated over and over again in the media, namely that people who are good at science are somehow bad at sports. I think it's complete nonsense. I think people who are driven in one field are likely to be driven in another field, right? So that you want to challenge yourself, and you want to get better. You're using structure, you're using purpose and strategy. All of these, let's say, personality traits really lend themselves, in my experience, to getting better, not just at science, but also at sports, if that's how you want to express it, or maybe even chess. And for example, learning about how much rest you need really taught me a lot, right? Because in a lot of endurance sports, it's really, the amount of training you can do is dictated by how how quickly you can recover. And this is a hard limit set by your body. You cannot just say, "Oh, I have a very strong will. I can will myself through this. I can go head first through the wall." No, eventually maybe you get sick, right? And then your body shuts down and shuts you down.
Incidentally, did this also teach you about rest needed for the mind, which is something that we underestimate, I think, at university?
Yes, absolutely. In this way, it was really instrumental. I mean, I could really talk about this very long, because it has influenced my teaching, my mentoring, everything, because there are a lot of similarities between, for example, coaching and mentoring students. You have to identify, what are weaknesses, what are their characteristics. If I'm not a sprinter, for example, so I could never dream of competing in 200 meters, but I have other assets. And so if you're in a sport like cycling, where you have different, people with different traits, sprinters and people who have a lot of diesel power can compete in the same race, you have to really think about the strategy that you're going to apply, right? I mean, if I'm not going to be competing in a sprint with Sven, right? I would be stupid, right? So I have to compete with him asymmetrically. All of these things are really so many interesting life lessons that you can learn. It's really a big field, yes.
I also think that the point you made about structure is something that really maybe also why I like doing mathematics, and why I like chess, and why I like doing dedicated training. It's like you just follow these steps and then you get better, and somehow that's something I really enjoy.
Yeah, you trust the process.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's not a constraint, it's a liberation, basically.
Yeah, and it's also nice. For example, what I find really nice about running track and training is that at work, sometimes you have to think about these very difficult problems. And then when I go to training, I just follow these steps. And then I don't have to, I have to use my mind a little bit, but not too much. You sort of take out your brain, leave it at your desk, you go home, you go to the track, and you just run.
That's actually something that surprised me recently. I started running a few months ago, mostly because everybody we invited in the podcast was running, and I said, why I'm the only one that doesn't like it? So I needed to try something just to see if I could like it or not. And what I thought was that I would mind wander a lot. And what I realized is that when you're there, you don't. You are in that zone, and you basically are there. You're not mind wandering that much. I was very surprised about that.
Yeah, so it's you. For me, it's not. I don't think about anything.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, there's nothing, and it's just a nice feeling sometimes to have.
If I can share my experience, I believe that I can think about things when I'm running, but it's on a different kind of speed. I'm shifting gears a lot when I'm doing sports. So somehow my thought process becomes much calmer. And maybe this also helps running and shifting gears in your thought process for replenishing your thinking and replenishing this fitness of your mind. Do you agree, Max?
Yes, especially when you do. So the others will know this. There are different training sessions with different goals, and there are some that are more mellow, where you try to train your endurance. And this is where I can really think about problems and think through. And of course, if I do very hard sessions, so for example, VO2 max, then no, there's no way I can think. I just have to survive.
That's been very interesting detour from the episode. But let's bring it back to the theme of today. So, what kind of skills that are not explicitly being able to make a proof have you acquired in your studies or in your sport experience? At this point, I think both would be interesting. That then you found out help you find a job.
Yeah, so I think that one of the main things that I noticed is I'm actually, for starters, very much able to think of things abstractly. And that is something you learn a lot in math, because the objects you work with, they don't exist. You can't sometimes you can draw them, you can't think of what they are. And it's very nice to think of, in my field, think of data just as sort of data. You know that you have to search for some examples, and actually work on the puzzle that I try to solve from that example. But I could also just sort of think of it as maybe a bit more categorical. Think of it, I have this column there, and then I have a column there, and I want to merge those columns in some way, and I make I join those columns together in a nice way. And you have, through math, you discovered a lot of strategies to work with these abstract things, making examples, making generalizations, making drawings sometimes. And that is something I think I picked up a lot through math, and also just a lot of problem-solving skills, and being able to deal with the fact that sometimes I can't solve something in 10 minutes. It might take me a day or two, or in the case of a master thesis, half a year. And that's also, I think, a nicer part of industry in that case, that I sort of know that I will be able to solve most of the problems I have. I know that there is a solution, because either someone else already did it, and hopefully a colleague, so I can ask, or that at least the solution is there, and if it's not there, then I say to the customer, sorry, it really can't be done.
So during your studies, did you then also acquire enough skills to find a job?
Well, to find a job, I'm not sure about that. I think that is really finding a job, doing the interviews, writing a CV. I mean, the studies I did was, when I think the same for Sven and probably also for Max, was very theoretical, and was very much guided towards doing a PhD and staying in academia, which is logical, because that is basically what you're trained for. But that does mean you're not that much trained for regular job interviews that are not going into a PhD, for instance. Of course, there are a lot of skills that transfer, giving presentations, writing stuff, and asking questions. But really finding a job, I don't think that I have really found that through math.
No, and of course, all the topics that you study within your studies, whether it's mathematics or physics, it's quite difficult. I mean, all these topics, trying to learn them in 3, maybe 5 years. Yeah. So there might not be a lot of room to teach people how to write a CV or a cover letter. No. But should we dedicate more time to it, you think, during our studies?
I'm not sure. I think that for starters, there are of course a lot of organizations through the university that you can go to and ask these questions. It's just that I didn't. Maybe until the end, and in the end of the studies, I did. I think there are a lot of initiatives from, for instance, study associations that actually do this and make you meet companies and sort of give you an idea of what you can do after studying math. So the initiatives are there, and I think that maybe it is also that studying math, you are sort of trained to be a mathematician, trained to be a problem solver, and from there you should be able in some way to sell, well, not yourself, but the ability of solving problems to a company. And actually, you might have to go through a traineeship or whatever in order to actually do the stuff that is needed there.
I see. And so, Max, if I understand it correctly, you're supervising students?
Yes, I'm technically not yet, but
Sort of.
let's say 2 weeks or so.
I see.
I got my first PhD student here in Potsdam. And yes, so I'm supervising again. I'm very happy about that. But I also did a lot of mentoring at my previous when I was working in the industry as well.
And I was wondering then, from your point of view, how should students be prepared for finding a job?
I think a lot is much easier than people think. You have to do your homework, right? And when you're studying anything, you learn to organize yourself, to organize your life. A lot of it is really, okay, what kind of company do you want to work for? Do you care to do any research about the company, right? Do you care to carefully read whether you could be a good fit for this position or not? These kinds of things are just things that I think you do learn, but of course you also should be talking to others, right? So there are a lot of skills, for example, being in a job interview. There, of course, it helps to talk to other people, but you could always have a bad job interview. When I interviewed, there were certain interviews where I think, I hit it out of the park. It was really, really good. I don't think I could have done much better, and I was not asked for a second interview. And then there were others where I said, wasn't my best day today, or it didn't fit well, and I was asked for a second interview. I have no idea why. There was one interview that was just really strange, simply because the person who was interviewing me, I think he had a sort of an HR manual of how to do interviews, but he didn't apply them, let's say, correctly with the sensibilities. And the HR person always tried to nudge him back on course, but she was not very successful. I remember I was asked, are you the kind of person who spends 3 months working by himself in the office, or are you the one writing emails during a presentation? I said, neither. I think I was more diplomatic. I'm not someone who was so rude that I simply don't listen. And I really like working in teams, and I was trying to bring this across. But he said, no, you have to pick one. Which are you? Right? So there's no good answer, and these are just things that you have to accept. And conversely, I was also on the other side. I also interviewed, I think I did 2 or 3 interviews at the company, substituting in for my boss. And I think that was also a very good experience to see it from the other perspective, where you first think about, okay, I also did my homework. I had a look at the CV and so on. I did some research. But who's this person, right? Does this person fit into the team? If so, what expertise do they bring to the table? What are some of the skills that they might have? What is their personality? Are they someone who's more, let's say, quiet, introverted, where these people need the right environment to flourish? Or are they the ones who are, dynamic? They naturally like to take charge. What kind of person are they, and how can you sort of integrate them into the team? These are things that I didn't think about necessarily before having the experience myself.
I see. And from what you've told, it sounds like you were very proactive in applying for jobs. How did you decide on applying? How did this all start? Did it start during your studies or after?
So basically, I was very proactive after a long period of procrastination, right? So my plan was to stay in academia, and at the time I was in Japan, but I was I was already a professor, but I was on a fixed term contract. And basically, I only had one shot at a professorship, and you already know how the story ended, but it looked like it would take quite a while for this to be decided in the first place, and this was not a sure thing at all. So I'd already interviewed for a position at university here at Potsdam, but I hadn't heard back, and I was told, yeah, it will take us some more months, so I had to find something. And to be honest, I should have started looking earlier, but I was very, very afraid to give up my lifelong dream to become a researcher and a professor. And I was really afraid of only doing boring work in the industry. And what the job that I found showed me is that this is not the case. The job that I had, I can say with confidence that I would have been happy to do this job, because it was tackling hard problems, different types of problems. I was not proving theorems or so, but I really had to understand a lot. I had to work with other people. I had to learn how to overcome, let's say, obstacles that are not of scientific nature. You have to work with other teams, and sometimes you have competing or different interests that are not properly aligned. So you have to sort of develop your own strategies and so on. And this was really something that I didn't know existed, or I was afraid would not exist. So I was sure I did not want to do a job in the finance industry, because it wouldn't give me any sense of motivation for myself, right? So some people are motivated more, let's say, by the prestige or maybe the money or whatever, but this was not mine. And I was thinking about what industries should I go into, what industries are sort of natural in terms of my skills. What industries are growing, and which industries are on the decline. And so I narrowed it down to semiconductor industry, renewable energies, and the healthcare sector. And just thinking about it, I thought, okay, the best shot is semiconductor is the semiconductor industry, not least because I always had a hobby type interest in how chips are made, and so CPUs and GPUs, but also, what kind of technologies were really the enablers. There was really the strong connection to physics. And this turned out to be a very good combination.
Actually, I would like to jump on this, because I have a very similar experience from when I went to industry, in the sense that I found jobs that were extremely challenging and fulfilling, and it somehow clashed with my previous experience. I don't think this is an experience that you have if you are in applied mathematics or more engineering fields, but when you come from more theoretical physics or general mathematics, there is this vague feeling that you have lost a good student, that you have joined the dark side. Somehow it gives a bad impression. Once you're out, you're out. It gives a very bad vibe to living, right?
Yes.
And
yes.
there is nothing wrong in living. And it can be as fulfilling, as challenging, if not more, than staying. So I really would like this stigma to disappear, because it's completely pointless.
Yeah, I was going to ask Max, so from the perspective that you have now back in academia, are you happy the way things have gone?
Very much. I think even though it was only a little bit more than half a year, it really enriched my life and it gave me so many new, let's say, impulses, inputs. There were people who are tremendously brilliant at the company where I worked. I remember my boss's boss's boss. He is, and I don't know how else to put it. He had all the technical skills, but he was also a very good. If I say politician, it has a negative connotation. I mean this with all the praise in the world. He often had to mediate conflicts, for example, and you could tell that he was thinking about what can I tell this person on this side of the conflict so that, let's say, to improve the situation, right? To and not to be manipulative or condescending, but let's say just in terms of mentoring them or giving them advice. Okay, we are clearly of different opinions here, but at least now, after having this big clash, everybody knows that there is a problem. And we can start working from there because sometimes people just don't see that there even is a problem. One side sees that there is a problem and either they're not communicating clearly enough or they're not communicating to the right through the right channels so that it is received on the other end. So the other side might not even be aware that there is a problem. And these are things that I think I would not have learned in academia if I had stayed. And this was this really enriched me and showed me that, there's really a rich tapestry of other problems where you can apply your skills that you've learned to that might have a more immediate impact on, let's say, on our lives, on our technology, but also that are intellectually equally stimulating.
I would like to jump on the other side of the table to Sven, because you were studying number theory, pretty abstract concept. So how did you go about finding a job and what was your experience? Does it reflect Oscar and Max?
So I think my story of getting from the master's degree to finding a job is a little bit of a roller coaster. So when I was studying, when I was writing my thesis, that was on elliptic curves, I just decided, okay, I'm just going to focus on my thesis. I'm not going to look for jobs or anything. I just want to do one thing and then I'll just see. Once I graduated, I'll see whatever I'm going to do. Then it happened and I was like, okay, well, now what? And one of the natural things, this is also something Oscar already mentioned, is that you get educated to become a mathematician. So maybe a good next step or a logical next step would be to do a PhD. But I wasn't sure whether I wanted to do a PhD, and there are also some factors that came into play there, which is like, do I want to move for a PhD? Do I want to go abroad for a PhD or not? So I didn't really know, so I decided I'm just gonna work at the Cool Blue, just as a salesperson in a shop to have some income, and decide on what I wanted to do. And then I decided that I wanted to stay at least in the Netherlands if I wanted to do a PhD. But the scene of getting a PhD is quite competitive, especially in my area. So there was elliptic curves. So I never got a PhD in the Netherlands. So I just decided to drop that idea and started to apply for jobs. And one of the things what I really liked about TNO is that, well, first of all, there's a department that studies or that does research into cryptography and quantum algorithms in Groningen. So that was a very logical next step for me because I really liked research and I liked mathematics, and quantum computing is quite mathematical, just as cryptography is. So I decided to apply there. but they did not have a position. So I just sent out an open application because I liked the work that they did, basically. So they did not have a position, and then I was like, okay, well, what am I gonna do now? But then I decided to just look around for other things that I found interesting that were data analysis, data science, software engineering, and I just started to apply for all these type of jobs. And then I think 4 months later, I was almost about to sign a job at the company that Oscar is now actually working at. That's
Small word.
I was about to sign a contract there, and then while I was on the track, I got a phone call from TNO that the position opened up and that they really wanted to hire me because they were really excited about my last application. So then I decided to work at TNO. So
Can you explain what TNO is? Because I have no idea. And
Yeah, of course.
Maybe some of the international audience also doesn't.
Yeah, so TNO is the Dutch organization for applied research, and it's supposed to be, or it is, an independent organization, and we do a lot of research for the government, but also for business to business clients. But really, we do applied research.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I work in the department that does research to quantum algorithms and cryptography, but we also have ICT departments, but also health and any type of applied research you can think that is beneficial for society, I would say.
And does this appeal to you that you're a little bit closer to application, but it still sounds like there's good contact with academia, no?
Yeah, so this latter point you mentioned is something that I really like. So a lot of the research I do is, it has an applied flavor. You're trying to solve a real world problem. You're trying to make this thing more secure with cryptography, or you're trying to optimize the coating of a solar panel by using quantum computing. But in the end, it's just all mathematics. And I think that's really nice. And also that there's a lot of connection with academia. So we work together as well a lot. So one of our tasks is really to get ideas in academia that may be a bit theoretical, and we try to convert them to something that can maybe make an impact on society, that can actually do something. Yeah. But coming back to my point about the roller coaster that I had. So I wanted to work at TNO, and they did not have a position, so I just decided to do something else. And then I got a phone call, and I think it's just luck or well, I don't really believe in faith, but sometimes it's just what comes to you is what you're gonna do, right? If I would have gotten a PhD position in Utrecht or Groningen, I would now have been doing a PhD, but I didn't, and now I'm just as happy working here. And I think if I never got that phone call and I would have worked at the company Oscar is working now, I would have just been as happy as I am now. So,
can you do a PhD at TNO?
Yeah, you can do a part-time PhD at TNO if you want to. Okay. Yeah.
Because at my employer, they also had several people doing varying degrees, including PhD, while they were working there. So this is also an option at some companies, at least.
Yeah, you can definitely do that. Yeah.
What was the hardest step for all of you in starting looking for a job?
First of all, of course, finding something that you want to do. I think it's also already been said that you are, of course, trained to be a mathematician. You want to do a PhD. And then actually finding something else that you think is worth your time and that you really want to do, that is very that was a very difficult step for me.
And how did you do that?
Actually, the fun thing is that as we have already heard, Sven also applied at the company I work for, So you start talking to people, and in this case, I talked to Sven, and he told me that this was a very nice company, and I already decided that I wanted to do something with data. I liked probability theory, I liked computing science, I liked programming. So that I was looking into the direction of data, software, ICT, something. And then Sven told me, oh, this is actually a very nice company. You should go talk to them. So I sent an email, and then they hired me for some reason, and I'm very happy. So I'm very grateful to Sven for recommending it. But I think that is also the way to go about it. Talk to a lot of people. Talk to people about what they are doing, how they find it, how the atmosphere is, because that is also a very, very important point. I really love my colleagues. I really love the time I spend at my job, and that is a large part for me in enjoying it. And that's not something you learn from a website or whatever. You really have to talk to people about that.
There is one more thing that I think transpires from what you're saying and also aligns a bit with my experience, is that in all of your cases, what you've been doing already had an element of passion and interest related to it. It's not just about finding the first job that comes, but finding one that comes somehow with the flavor or a direction that you like the semiconductor linking to Max hobby, data analysis for you, cryptology and research for you. So each of them has the seed of something that you like besides what you have studied. So somehow it's a combination of your interest and your previous experience. Am I wrong in that?
I think mathematics, you should really see mathematics as studying mathematics as having a very big toolbox, and you can use it in very different types of topics. And if you're just passionate about one topic, you can definitely use your degree in that topic. And if you're passionate about some other topic, you can use the tools there as well. So I think what you really learn is how to use these tools and actually attaining these tools during your studies. And then if you just follow your passion or something you want to do, or maybe you want to tackle climate change, you can definitely use your mathematics skills there as well. You can basically use them everywhere. But that's what they keep telling us at the when you were studying. You can do everything, which is also very confusing.
So if we're talking about skills, I assume, correct me if I'm wrong, that working in industry, or at least for Sven and Oscar right now, the atmosphere is much different from academia. So you might need other skills. Can you maybe divulge on how it's different? And this also goes for you, Max, but the Max from a few years ago.
No. Should I start?
Yeah, you can.
I think a lot of my skills transferred quite nicely. So as a scientist, you have to be somewhat entrepreneurial, and in the company that I worked for, EVG, this was very much welcome. For example, when I applied for other jobs, I had the feeling that they didn't know what to do with me. I was perhaps overqualified in some areas, but lacking experience in others. And just from my very first interview with, the boss's boss that I mentioned earlier, he made it clear, we're looking for a job for you. We're not quite sure yet, but we have an idea. And then I met my boss and we just hit it off. And this was a very different, let's say, mindset than at many other places. You really have to look for something that fits you and where you feel like, okay, this is the right crowd of people where I can flourish. And then you're being put in a position where you can apply your skills. So for example, I also had to do with some EU grants, industrial grants, and these were skills that transferred over directly, where I said, okay, this is very easy. And the hardest, quote unquote hardest thing was that there are some let's say industry quirks that I had to sort of take into account that in academia, for example, you're very open, whereas in industry, a lot of information is protected and you don't want to give too much away, so you have to say what you're doing, but maybe not tell too much so that you might tip off competitors, or at least let's say that's what the legal department and other people would say. So, but I think a lot of skills, they transfer over very, very directly.
That's actually very interesting to hear, Max. Thanks a lot. And I'm curious to hear also from Oscar and Sven point of view, the experience that they had when they moved from being students, or at least researcher in the sense of masters students, to industry. How the atmosphere is different, how the roles you experience are different. And I'd like this to lead to an understanding what are the differences from being in academia and in industry. And perhaps on the actual differences in the jobs, maybe we can chip in with Max, but your first impact as a student leaving and going to industry, how did you feel it different from being at university?
What I think is really different in my work is that when you are doing your masters, you're doing it on your own. You're really producing something on your own, and you get graded on the result you provide. But if you work, you maybe work for a client. So in TNO, we are a project-based organization. So that means you sometimes work on 5 or 6 different projects at the same time, which is also different compared to university. But well, first of all, you're never doing something alone. You always work together. So there's this sort of shared responsibility. And when you go home and something perhaps isn't finished, you can just finish it the next day. And there isn't really someone, or maybe, and that's also not the case when you are doing your master's thesis, but there it feels like the responsibility is on yourself, and at work the responsibility is on your boss. So for me, that shift in dynamic where the responsibility is not so much on myself anymore made me much more relaxed at my job. But yeah, one of the things I already mentioned is that in TNO we work on different projects, and during your master's degree or your thesis, you work on one very specific problem for a very long time, usually a year. So that was a bit of a shock, to be honest. I found it really hard to juggle like 6 or 7 different projects in the same week. But you get used to it, so you won't be able to delve into as much depth as you did for your 1-year project on one very small problem, but you can have a broader look on several different topics, and you can still do good research doing that, I think.
To give the audience an idea, because I'm interning at TNO at the moment, from what I've seen, this working in projects, working together, which is what you do mainly, really feels much like these group projects that you do during your studies in mathematics. And so this maybe gives a bit of context for people that are wondering what it's like.
Yeah. So I completely agree, but I would like to say that everybody is then very much involved in the group project. Yeah. So although sometimes you do have colleagues that maybe are not working as hard as you are, but from my experience at TNO, maybe that comes because of the selection procedure, but everybody actually wants to do the work. So you should think about these projects as group projects at university where everybody really wants to get the best result.
Good point.
Yeah.
How is this for you, Oscar?
Well, I think Sven has said a lot of the things I also notice. Indeed, maybe you go a bit more to a 9-to-5 job, and that does mean that after 5 you can sort of stop thinking about it. You of course you don't. That still happens, and you're awake at night and you think, oh, maybe I should do this or I should do that. But it does become a bit easier because indeed you're not only doing it for yourself, you're doing it for a client who you can discuss things with. Also, you have a lot of colleagues who do similar things or do the same things. So if you don't know anything, it's much easier to ask. They are not. It's not that you're just on your own on this very big problem very small problem actually, that you try to solve in this 1 year, and you are the expert basically. I mean, I don't think I ever was. I think Marcello was, but still, you sort of. It's nice to have a lot of colleagues who know stuff, and even if they don't know, well, you can probably figure it out together, and that working in teams is actually is nice. The other part is also that you are more often expected to be somewhere. I think Sven already said you have to be in meetings a bit more often, and in those meetings you might actually have to discuss a lot of things and talk about things and.
So you're much more with colleagues all the time. What has this done to maybe your interpersonal contact skills?
In my case, I think that is also something I always really liked. I also during my mathematics studies, I really liked teaching a lot, which basically comes down to communicating with people in a very theoretical sense. And I think that is something I do really like about industry and working with colleagues, that I can actually have a lot of interaction with them, and also just have a lot of laughs, drink a lot of coffee, and actually, you're never alone on a problem, and you're basically, as Sven already said, you're on a team that really. Everyone wants to get the best result.
And I really think that maybe it's because of the team vibe, or maybe because we are more team players than we thought we would be, but that makes it that the job is more relaxed. Like, you're not on your own. While doing a thesis, you are on your own. I mean, you have your supervisor, but still, you're trying to be an independent researcher. And at my job and your job, you can work together.
Yeah, and also you don't have to prove yourself. It's not there's no exam in the end. You have to, of course, deliver some product. But yeah, you if as long as you really do your best and you make a good planning, then you will be able to do it.
I'm curious because I'm curious because what you say brought out a lot of memories, and I can relate with the social feeling, the social aspect of being in a team and working together and having lunch together and discussing the issues you're having on the next project while playing table football or ping pong during breaks. But also, something that resonated a lot with me was that indeed the pressure is not news on your boss. And I remember the one big difference for me in the experience I'm having as an academic and the experience I had in industry is that there was a moment in which we were overworked and we had a lot of things to do. Now here, it's always the case, and what I need to find is I need to decide for myself what is my priority, trying to gauge what are the priorities of whatever and whoever is around me. And then, okay, I might get it right or wrong, who knows. At the company, I go to my manager and I say, look, you're asking me to do 24, I have 11. Let's figure this out. And then you sit together and say, okay, this goes to the team, please help them, this goes there, and then now you have 10, so you can have your one to just settle down a bit. And this is a massive relief. Because yes, sometimes you have to give up some things you really cared about, but it fits in your time. And also you feel that the organization is somehow coming along with you to find a good compromise between your needs and their needs. and to make sure that you are in a good environment so that you can give the most to them.
If I may add, it's
Yes.
not just needs, it's also the maybe company strategy, right? So there might be things going on that you're not aware of that are happening in other teams, and maybe your boss is aware of, and he might. So this happened to me where my boss said, please drop these projects. This is number one. And if you have a boss like that, this is really a huge relief, because it's very likely that he or she knows very well what is going on, and also the very clear communication to you. And, perhaps, if necessary, they can also give reasoning. This could be a bit more complicated depending on the circumstances and secrecy, but it's very important to focus to help employees or team members to focus on what is important. And we have to do this ourselves in academia. The teams, there's usually less hierarchy. It's scattered around the world. Marcello's in Groningen. We have a colleague in Chile. I have colleagues in Japan and France and so on. And so there's no clear hierarchical relationship between us. But in a company, that's much clearer. And that really helps sometimes to strip away all these complications. If your boss says, please drop this, focus on this.
And so this leads to my next question, because what are things that you missed in industry mocks that you found in academia might have formed a reason for you to go back to academia?
Yeah, so for me, let's say the reasons to go back were twofold. I mean, one, it was a lifelong dream for me to being academia, but it was also my wife. She's Japanese, and we were living in the countryside. It was very peculiar. Inside the company, there were people from 30 different nations working together, but outside of the company, it was decidedly just villages. And she felt a bit lonely. So this was a second deciding factor. If my wife had said, I want to stay here and I don't want to go to Potsdam, we would have stayed there. Just to put this into context. What was the second part of the question?
I guess this is more of a question also for Sven and Oscar. What are you missing now that you did have in academia?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think what I was missing was the freedom to pursue what I wanted. I think I could have done this in smaller ways at the very least inside the company, but here I would be my own boss, and even if you have a very good boss, maybe you don't agree with all decisions, or let's say sometimes it's just circumstances, not necessarily conscious decisions, but there were things that I wanted to pursue that I likely couldn't have at the company. I think it's mostly being my own boss. I really enjoy this.
And then, so going to Sven then, what reasons? No, is there a chance of you ever returning to academia, you think?
No, I don't think so. I don't think well, you never say never, but what I miss from academia is being able to delve into a topic very deeply, like very, very deeply, and perhaps not having to worry about budget issues, which is something you have to deal with at work quite often. So sometimes you just have to finish a project and you're not happy with it, but there's no money left, so you just have to make it work, which is something I really dislike because I like to polish things and have a good result. Mm-hmm. But I think for me, the stress that I had at university does not outweigh the things I could have at university. So I really like my job now, and I don't think I want to go back.
Completely understandable. How is that for you?
Let me open a parenthesis.
Sure.
I mean, we are going to strike today because of budget cuts at the university, massive ones here in the Netherlands. So money problems, especially in more theoretical science, I guess we are on the same ballpark, if not worse. Close parenthesis.
So, how is this for you, Oscar?
So, like Sven already also said, I don't really think I will be coming back to academia or anything. I really like the job I'm having now, and I really like my colleagues, and I really like the work we're doing. I really like the puzzles we solve. Of course, there are things you miss, but they are mainly just that I miss doing math. I mean, I do a little bit of math in my job, but it's not. Yeah, I sometimes miss just diving into algebraic topology or doing differential geometry or doing something in the sense of master's level math. And well, sadly, no one ever asked me to do that.
Yeah.
And another thing I really miss, and that is something that might come at some point during my career as a data engineer, AI engineer. I really like the teaching part, which was not necessarily a part of being a student, but it was one of the side jobs I did. I really think that has taught me a lot. But it is something, that I really enjoy doing and talking to students, figuring out problems together. And it does look a lot like the job I'm doing right now. But yeah, it's a little different.
Can I add to this from the other perspective? Because in my former team, we had everything from former professors, not just me, to people finishing or just in the process of doing their bachelor's thesis. And I think that you have to have a lot of maturity to understand yourself and to understand what suits you best, what kind of job you want, what kind of role you want, because this really differs for people, let's say, who stop after a bachelor, who stop after a master's degree, and so on, or after a PhD, maybe with some postdoc experience or even more. And you really need to make a very adult decision what it is that you want to do with your life, and what kind of job you're aiming for. If you have a PhD, the expectations are different. The expectations are that you yourself, you take a bigger problem apart and you pursue it across several years. And if you are, let's say, when I was mentoring someone who just finished his master's, let's say the skill set was very different. They had, let's say, much less theoretical background than I have, simply by virtue of time. And so I saw my job quite naturally as also mentoring these younger teammates, and vice versa, right? So if you enter a company and you see someone who is a potential mentor, it does not have to be, let's say, some sort of official relationship, but it really helps if you seek out some form of mentorship.
Actually, you make a very good point here, because indeed the earlier you go in, the more you are expected to be trained inside the company, and the later you go, then the later you would have done a bit of the career progression already. So there is expectation that you have some more soft skills, some more team leading skills, and so on. Like when I entered, for example, after postdocs, they wouldn't give me a completely senior role because I didn't have enough industry experience, but I wasn't suitable for a junior role. So I had to find an in-between where I would lead my own team, but in the meantime figure out how it worked, the life at the company. And this is something that is important to keep in mind depending on when you want to move. But nevertheless, there are plenty of examples showing that no matter when, you can actually move. But you have to find something that is aligned with your interest. Given the time, Anna, would you like to lead us?
So talking about making a very mature decision at the end of your bachelor, master's, PhD, or postdoc, or even further along, how do you come to this decision of what job you're wanting to do, what motivation you have for which jobs exactly? What do you recommend for students wanting to move outside of academia?
I think the first thing that always crops up is something that was not mentioned enough, and that's things that in physics you call the two-body problem. It's your partner and maybe also family. You know, do you want to stay, for example, within the Netherlands or not? Are you free to move across Europe or not? Are you free to work in the US or in Canada or in Japan or not? These are decisions that are that should be made very consciously, and you have to accept then the limitations that are placed upon that, right? So, for example, I had an offer to go to Chile. My wife did not want to go to Chile, and that was the end of the story, right? I could not go. So talking about these with people that are near and dear to you, and and especially in case you want them to be geographically near and dear to you, is the first starting point, I think, because it's such an important fact of life. Finding a partner, finding and maintaining friendships. This is a key to long-term happiness. And then, of course, let's say academically, there are also all sorts of things. What kind of roles do you see yourself in a few years? Would you like to be the one who let's say, gains the experience inside of the industry, right? And then you leave university earlier? Or do you think it's better to acquire some more academic expertise in different fields and then contribute those, right? And there's no universal right or wrong answer, but I would encourage anyone to think about it consciously and make this decision consciously, and talk to people, to your friends, to your partners, to your supervisor, to fellow students about this, because this is really something that you should just think through. And let's say from the perspective of the supervisor, especially given that the academic job market is getting more and more and more difficult, if you want a permanent position, I will place much more emphasis on what I would call dual-use skills. So abilities or knowledge that can be applied also in an industrial context. And one of them could be teaching, right? I had several, let's say, small lectures, I would call them, but of course much less structured and much smaller in scope. But you can bring these skills to the table if the company or the organization you work for permits it. Learning languages is a huge one, and knowing different cultures. This is really big because we're inside of Europe. We have almost 30 countries working together, many languages. And if you zoom out, it's even more complicated. If you go towards Asia or so, that was a big factor, I think, in me being hired. I'd lived in North America, I'd lived in Asia, and this knowing that you have to deal with Asian customers differently than with American customers. This is something that if you know the cultures, you can manage it much more easily, but it's not a skill that I would connect to mathematics, but you can, for example, incorporate this by doing an Erasmus or by doing a year or a semester abroad. So these are all skills that I would encourage. If there are some universities have a graduate school program where you can learn about, let's say, organizational skills, improving your people skills, team building exercises, and so on. This is something that I would encourage because this has also helped me a lot.
So it sounds much like the combination of what you're motivated by and the skills that you have can play a huge role in your decision for the job that you want to do.
Absolutely, because they put you in a position where you could conceivably be open to certain jobs or not, right? So if, let's say, you wanted to work for ASML in the Netherlands, you know, they have the same customer base as my former employer. And if, for example, by some luck or by interest, you have experience with Korean culture, this will be an asset. And maybe a few years down the road, you might be asked to work with a Korean customer. And because of your language skills, your cultural skills, this will make the job much easier for you than for other people.
Sven, what would you say to your fellow students, former fellow students?
Yeah, so when people ask me the question on what do you recommend, I have to think very hard because I find that a very difficult question. So some of the things Max mentions are very important, like do you want to go abroad and do you want to work in a team, or what type of topic do you want to work on? Do you want to make a real impact on life around you, for example? But I always find these a bit vague, so maybe I'll try to give a bit of a concrete advice here. So what would I have liked to know, like say 3 years ago? And one of the things is that I wish I would have gotten into programming more. I basically do it 50-60% of the time at my job, and I've noticed that some of my colleagues are just much better because they've been doing that for 4 or 5 years already. And at my job, there's definitely opportunity to learn, but I think it would have been nice if I already knew those things. And so coding is one thing I would really recommend learning, especially with the rise of AI nowadays. It's just, I guess, like 90% of the jobs after mathematics, you'll have to do something with code, maybe. And yeah, one of the other things is you can continuously in a circle keep thinking on what you want. Do you want to work in a team or not? But really, there's only one way to actually find that out, which is to try. And if you don't like the company you work at, you can just quit and go somewhere else. And if you don't like the PhD you're doing, you can also just quit. So I guess my advice there would be to just sort of have an open mind and being willing to try things, so that you can actually experience whether you like them. So sometimes it's hard to think and then make a decision. Sometimes you just have to do and then make a decision.
Do you have something to add to that, Oscar?
Yes. Well, first of all, I think the advice that both my colleagues in this podcast have given is very, very good. I especially agree with the programming. That was also on my list. I think in general, understanding how the IT networks work, from servers, but also just programming or how these things work. I think it has been very nice. I think what I would like to add is also, and this is very difficult because if you are studying math, then you don't have a lot of time next to it. However, definitely in hindsight, I wished I had spent more times on hobbies and doing different things. Marcello already concluded before that a lot of the things we do are now things that we already liked, and then we combined it somehow with our studies. And I think that through these hobbies, through doing the things you like to do, you both acquire a lot of the skills that you need. You figure out whether you really would like it to do it as a job, and also now I'm going to say a scary word, but you make a network. You find people with like-minded ideas or that are like-minded. You meet a lot of people that might be further along in their career and can tell you just what the possibilities are, and that also holds if you don't want to do it through hobbies. I think, the word networking is very very weird, but I think that sort of just talking to people who just graduated is a very good idea. That's the best way you learn what companies and what life outside the Math Institute is like.
I completely agree. I mean, talking to supervisors in the university, you of course get a very one-sided picture because most of them have just stayed in academia and found a profession there. Whereas with your peers or even students that are a little bit older, you get much more information on how to do your applications. They can check your cover letters, your CV. So there's a huge benefit in building up your community of peers within your studies.
Yeah, and also to add to Oscar's point on taking time to do your hobbies, I also think it's important for students to do that, to not get caught up in only doing mathematics. There are also other things in life that are important.
Yes.
Here.
Anna, as a student that is finishing and doing an internship and has to decide what to do you have anything else to add?
I'm very happy I got to talk to you because the decision doesn't feel easy, but I think the best advice that I can take with me from this podcast is certainly that I should just give things a try and then see from there.
Yeah, I think I could not agree more with that. And I would like to say one last thing before I thank you all very much for joining us for this interesting discussion. I completely agree with everything that was said, and I would add one more thing, which is think out of the box. Look back at your life, everything, what you studied, what you lived, what hobbies do you have, and see them as what did I learn from all of this thing. Forget about the specific topic. What did you learn about this? And you find so much material to resell yourself into the job world, being academia or being industry. But you really need to be just looking at that as if it was another person, not you, and try to see what's there to learn, what have I done there. And the other thing, do the same also for the job you're looking. Like I know people that have started their own companies, their own startups. I know people that went into teaching, people that went into science journalism, beekeeping. I mean, everybody has found what they actually like doing and give them purpose. And at some point, it's a hard reflection on what you want, and it's a lot of trying things out. But it's something that you shouldn't be afraid of. It's just, I think it can be very fulfilling. So it's a long episode. We have plenty of questions and that we have not answered yet. So we might have a few more with people that have done different types of jobs to just compare and see what they have to say. But so far, at least I hope we started doing our bit in trying to make the listeners that are interested, that I know are a lot, aware of what are the possibilities and what to look for and what to be aware of for when they will start looking for a job. I want to thank you all very much for all the time you dedicated to us to prepare this episode and to be here and discuss the topic with us. And I want to thank everybody for listening. And if you like this episode or you find it useful, please share it in your social networks and with your friends. And hopefully to the next month.